Once you've got an idea, then you go into phase 2 of the framework, and that is about developing the business model. And the business model is crucially dependent on deciding who your customers are going to be, who are your target customer segments, deciding on what their wants, what their needs are likely to be. And once you decide on who those customers are, putting together what we call a value proposition, something that they are willing to pay for. That value proposition has got to be something that gives them benefits, that is something that they want, that is something hopefully that other competitors aren't providing them with at the moment. So once you've decided on the customers and the value proposition, you can then start to put together a marketing strategy, a marketing mix that gives them what they really want. And if you can deliver that to them, then of course, ultimately what you've got is a brand, a name of your company, of your product, of your service that they will go back to time and time and time again. Because what you really want is to get that customer from being somebody who tries a good idea, good product, a good service, to being a loyal customer who goes back and buys it again and again. So once you've got your marketing strategy together, the next phase is to develop an operational plan. How you're going to deliver it. What are the critical success factors, the things you've got to get right if the business is to succeed and flourish? So you develop your operations plan, looking at the critical success factors. What are the risks that you face? Every business faces risks. You can't avoid them. The trick, if there is a trick, is to try to predict what the risks might be and plan for them as best you can. So that operational plan will look at the critical success factors, including the risks that you face and the things that you need to do to make certain the risks are monitored, the risks are acted on. So you've got your marketing plan, you've got your operations plan. The next thing is the financial plan. That pulls all of these things together. But of course, that's crucially dependent on the resources that you have, you bring to the business. Some people bring very little other than their skills, and that's vitally important. But also you can buy in the skills and knowledge of other people. So you look at the resources you might have, but then, of course, the resources you need. So those 4 things tie it all together. The marketing plan, which includes the target market and the value proposition, the operations plan, the financial plan, and then the resources that you have and the resources that you need. Those things together form the kernel of the business model. And it's the business model really that will determine how successful you will be. Customers buy a product or service because it solves a problem for them. I don't know what that problem is, you've got to discover it, but ultimately it solves a problem for them that they're willing to pay to have solved. It does something that benefits them, that gives them benefit. And people buy product or service not because of the characteristics of that product or service, it's because of the benefits that that product or service brings. What problems does that product or service solve for them? That is what customers are willing to pay for. And of course, the other side to that question is how much are they willing to pay? And if the problem that you've solved for them is a minor one, then of course, hey, they're not going to pay very much. But if you've solved a big problem for them, then they're willing to pay a lot more. And that big problem doesn't necessarily mean that it will cost you a lot to develop a solution to it. Because sometimes people ignore the most basic problems, or more particularly the solutions to those basic problems in the products or services that they develop. And just by tweaking those products or services in some minor way, relatively minor way, at a relatively low cost, customers develop enormous benefits from that and are willing to pay a higher price. Better still, they're willing to pay that higher price and shift the purchase of that product or service from competitors to you. It is possible to start a business with limited money. It's more difficult to start it with limited resources because ultimately the resource you need and is crucial is yourself. And that comes down to your character, your entrepreneurial character, the skills and knowledge that you bring to the business. Now, assuming you've got those in place, and that is crucial, because if you don't have that as a fundamental, there's nothing else to build upon. But assuming you've got that in place, then you can buy in skills or knowledge that you don't have. And you can, if you've really got a good business idea and a good business plan, then you can always get money to buy in additional resources that you might need. So assuming you're the right sort of person to set up a business, then yes, you can always find the resources to set up a good business idea. All businesses face risk. You can't avoid it. If there is a trick, then it is to plan ahead. And what do I mean by trying to plan ahead for risk? Because it's something that almost by definition it happens by luck. Things happen. Stuff happens in life. So what you've got to do is to try to identify the things that might just happen. The bad things, particularly, that just might happen as you set up your business. And then try to assign some sort of probability to it. Once you've got some sort of probability, you've got anything from highly likely to very unlikely. But again, what impact is that going to have on your business? You may have highly unlikely things that are going to have a disastrous effect on your business. Well, are you going to ignore those? It depends on the probability to some extent. But you might have minor things that are highly likely to happen, in which case you can say, the odds are that will happen when I set up my business. And those are the things you must plan for. Even if the impact is relatively minor, you can predict it's going to happen. You ought to plan then for how you're going to deal with it. So you've got first of all, identifying the risk, trying to assign some sort of probability to its occurrence, then saying how much is that going to affect your business? How much is that going to have an impact on your business? And then the fourth thing that you've got to do is to start to plan as to how you might mitigate it. So let me give you an example. We know that earthquakes happen, and we know that earthquakes are highly unlikely to happen, but when they happen, they can have an enormous impact and cause death and destruction. So we plan ahead for that sort of occurrence. How do we plan ahead? How do we mitigate the effects of an earthquake? We can't prevent it. There's nothing we can do to stop it happening, but we can create buildings that are more resistant to earthquakes. We can plan our emergency services so that they're able to better cope with earthquakes. So there's just about any risk or crisis that a business or indeed a nation might face that you ought to be able to plan for them. You really ought to be.